Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here today. We're going to start off the webinar in just a few moments, so please stand by. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here today for the webinar on how to use cognitive testing to hire top performers. I'm Natalie Serestrafel, and it's my pleasure to speak with you all today. The length of this will be about 30 minutes, and there will be some time towards the end of the session for any questions. You can also type in your questions throughout the webinar as they come up, and we will also be recording this session. So if anyone wants to hear it again or send it over to other interested parties, please feel free to do so. Look for the link to the recording in your inbox. So today we're going to be taking a closer look into cognitive assessments. We're going to understand a bit more about their background, what they measure, the different types of cognitive models out there, and we're going to get into how we can use them to hire top performers, how we can use them to train and develop employees and make better team decisions. But before we get into that, let me introduce myself. Again, I'm Natalie Serestrafil, and I'm a specialist in personality, behavior, and cognitive assessments, and I've been a consultant for a number of organizations in heavy industry. I'm also a program director at TalentClick, and here we specialize in helping organizations in a variety of different industries mitigate risk, such as turnover, absenteeism, incidents, management challenges, and really just increase their overall positive events like efficiencies, high performing teams, better team morale, employee satisfaction, and much more. The reason we do this is because of the high cost of turnover across industries. So research has shown across the board that the cost of turnover can range anywhere between 25 and 200% of a person's annual compensation. And that goes without mentioning the indirect costs associated with things like training, onboarding, lost time, and et cetera. The thing is, everyone knows what a bad hire looks like after the fact. And oftentimes, when we're making our hiring decisions, we tend to rely on untraditional interviewing, which has really shown to have only about a 50% success rate. Other valuable pieces of information that you consider are things like background checks, reference checks, and These are all great pieces of information. If you're doing that, carry on doing it. The only thing there is that they tend to focus on someone's past behaviors, and they're not necessarily indicative of someone's skills, their preferences, and their work styles. And that's why there's a large body of research out there that really indicates the use and the efficiency of cognitive abilities and how they're used to effectively predict workplace performance outcomes. So in the remainder of today's session, we're really going to better understand the importance of using assessments to choose the right people for your workforce. So across all job categories, we can see that individual differences in a cognitive abilities have really shown a strong increase in variabilities in performance. So high performers, when you look at their cognitive abilities, there's a strong link and correlation there. And given that piece of information, it should come to no surprise that more and more organizations are using predictive analytics and this type of business intelligence to really help them identify higher risk applicants at the hiring stage. So not when it's too late, not once the person's already on your team. They've been used for identifying good employees who may have otherwise been excluded in the hiring process or in the interview process. They're great for allocating job duties or reassigning roles. And they're also really effectively used for identifying training leads for an existing workforce. And of course, a great tool for identifying patterns and trends in an organization too. So just a really quick background on psychometrics. The whole field of performance prediction has really advanced over the past 100 years. But when initially psychometric assessments came on the scene, this was really in the late 1800s. And even then, they were being used as a means to measure individual differences when it came to intelligence. It really wasn't until just over 50 years ago that personality even started to be considered. So really looking here and seeing that the whole concept of measuring cognitive ability has really been around for a really long time as an effective predictor for on-the-job performance. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into some of the really popular topics that tend to come up when we are talking about things like assessment tools and cognitive ability tools. First, we'll dive into the defensibility. So some of the assessment tools out there have often been criticized in the past for being too invasive. However, as long as you're looking at one thing such as equal employment opportunities compliance and make sure that they're validated and they're not really subject to things like adverse impact and other pieces of information that could be discriminatory. We just really say that these are tools that provide more insight, more understanding into someone's strengths and their possible areas for concern. And they help you really highlight what areas to probe into during the interview process and during reference checks. So again, just like you're using other pieces of information on a candidate, such as interviewing, skills testing, background screening, all those things are great pieces of information and they're data on a candidate. So if you are looking to use additional pieces of information on a candidate, whether it's psychometric assessments or cognitive assessments, use it as a 20% piece of information. Don't make it a pass or fail or a means to really make those clear-cut decisions on a candidate. If you've had experience either taking assessments yourselves or have read assessment results for candidates that you've been considering, you'll often see that a lot of the times the language is written in a pretty easy to understand way. So you don't necessarily need a complex background or an advanced degree to be able to understand the results in the reports. Typically, the way the reports and the results are delivered, they're meant to be comprehensible by someone with a third grade education level. And you'll definitely see that within the interview questions as well. There's coaching tips in there that can be used during supervision or for coaching and training existing workers, so that you can really get a better gauge into how to better coach, train, and mentor an individual, if you are using these tools for training and development as well. So up until about 20 years ago, the whole process of taking assessments was still pretty manual. So they were often paper-based. If you have any experience with these Scantrons, up until 20 years ago, even these assessments were taken via something like a Scantron, and then the tests were often proctored, and then the results were then evaluated by an individual. So having that whole process be a little bit manual exposed the whole process of assessment taking to a lot of manual processing errors, some bias in there because of that whole human factor element. And so the advancement of technology has really made it so that nowadays, if you want to assess people, it's a lot easier to do that because the process is automatic, free of things like the bias of potential human error factors. And another bonus point is that you get your results within minutes. So there's not that huge turnaround time that's required by someone having to grade it or proctor it. Now everything is online, and you can get great information and great data on a candidate within minutes. So with this whole advancement of technology, it's besides from the fact that it's made the whole process of cognitive testing a lot more seamless, it's also a lot more affordable as well. So assessing your team, assessing candidates has become a lot more affordable. It's a fraction of the cost now, hence why more and more organizations are using these tools as a proactive means to make better decisions around fit and their teams. So the defensibility, the utility, technology, and affordability of cognitive assessments have really led to the popularity of their usage, especially in more and more Fortune 500 companies. That's why you're seeing their popularity increase. And really that, in conjunction with the research out there around the use and application of the tool, has really led to the increased popularity and the explosion of predictive analytics across a number of different fields and industries. So how do we measure cognitive ability? Let's get into how we do that. We measure cognitive ability, and when we look at cognitive ability, typically there's 7 primary models of cognitive evaluation. So there's verbal meaning, there's numerical ability, there's word fluency, perception speed, spatial ability, reasoning, and memory. And often these categories are then subcategorized into 3 major compartments known as verbal skills, numerical skills, spatial skills. And these are the 3 sections that we're really going to be focusing on primarily today. So let's start off by looking at verbal skills. An individual's verbal skills can often be measured by these different categories of evaluation that you'll see on screen. So when we're looking at something like word meaning, here we're really evaluating a person's vocabulary and their language abilities. Word questions, here you're really looking at someone's ability to identify the relationship between words. So for example, you may be given a group of words and then asked to identify the relationship between the words in a group. Error identification. This is all about understanding how a person, and if they can, identify errors in a sentence. So whether these errors are grammatic errors, they're spelling mistakes, or syntaxical, these types of verbal skill testings around error identification help you do just that. Verbal reasoning, these are areas of understanding a person's comprehension. So generally they consist of a passage of text and some related statements, and then you're asked to read through a passage and evaluate the statements which follow it accordingly. So these assessments really aim at evaluating your ability to think constructively rather than its simple fluency or vocabulary recognition, often associated with word meaning questions. And then last but not least, there's sentence completion. And in most cases of these examples, a sentence will contain 1 or 2 blanks, and you'll be asked to fill those blanks with a series of choices. So here, these questions are testing your vocabulary and your knowledge of distinctions amongst words. So that's your verbal skills and the different categories within verbal skills. Then there's numerical skills. When we're looking at numerical skills, these are tests often that require you to answer questions based on facts and figures. So normally there's one correct option to pick in the series of questions, question answers, and often in most cases calculators are permitted, although it's not always the case. But these tests are really designed to ensure that you're comfortable with numbers, mathematical functions, and the interpretation of data. So the numerical reasoning is often the portion of a test that is timed, and although different tests may have different time limits, you're expected to be given about 50 to 60 seconds per question. And the numerical reasoning test is designed so that 1 to 2% of test takers can correctly answer all questions within the time limit. So often you'll also observe that the most difficult questions are placed at the end of the test. The numerical reasoning test doesn't solely measure arithmetic skills, hence you're usually allowed a simple calculator. So here with these types of evaluations, you're often looking at a few different things here. With mechanical skills, these are often designed for engineering and mechanical roles. So with mechanical aptitude tests or mechanical reasoning tests, you're commonly, these are administered for technical and engineering positions. And these really measure your ability to understand and apply mechanical concepts and principles to solve problems. So positions that you would typically use mechanical reasoning for include train drivers, fire brigade, tradespeople, operations roles, assembly line workers, and the level of difficulty and complexity for these test questions varies, of course, according to the skills required for the role. So each test offers you with a mechanical scenario that might include questions around acceleration, gravity, friction, pressure, energy transformation, levers, pulleys, screws, gears, and springs, and so forth. So again, the level of complexity will depend on the position you're applying for. So as an example, the test questions for candidates applying for managerial roles will be at a higher level of difficulty and complexity than those for candidates applying for entry-level roles. So it's important to note that the skills that make up spatial ability are the results of long learning and training processes. So this is actually one of the key areas that can change drastically over time, because it's an area that really improves based on your practice, your training, and your learning. We've also got advanced business reasoning skills measures, and these are really designed to evaluate management level employees' cognitive abilities. So they're asked to solve a range of on-the-job problems using verbal and numerical data that would be encountered in a leadership or management role. So employers use the results of business reasoning tests to learn the extent to which a potential managerial candidate is capable of efficiently and effectively identifying critical business-related issues and the types of logical conclusions they can draw based on data and things like performance figures. Here you're also looking at whether an individual is capable of efficiently measuring performance and the progress based on numerical metrics such as charts and tables. In the verbal verbal sections of these types of tools, you're really asked and called to evaluate on your logical understanding and your decision making based on various statements presented to you. So here you're being measured on your ability to process information quickly and draw accurate conclusions in a logical manner, which these are very essential components, especially for leadership and management level roles. So what's cognitive ability? So when we're looking at cognitive ability, we're really looking at how we learn, how we remember, how we problem solve, how we relate to things, how we carry out tasks, and how we observe and pay attention. We're also looking at the subjects, hobbies, and pastimes you tend to gravitate towards. So whether you're an avid reader, into crosswords and puzzles, you like crunching numbers or working on projects in your garage, your strengths lie where you focus the majority of your time. So testing for cognitive ability is extremely valuable because it gives you an understanding within 20 to 30 minutes of a candidate and what their strengths are and what their areas for development are. And this is, of course, very valuable information when you're making effective placement decisions. So the reports really give you a in-depth and thorough insight into how individuals fit within their given roles, where their strengths lie, and the steps that they can take to improve and develop upon their abilities. So they're given actionable tips, tools, and feedback on how they can strengthen different areas that might require further attention. In a recent case study we did with an international forestry company, we found a strong correlation between employees and candidates who had advanced language, numerical, and spatial skills and their ratings on areas like their job fit, safety, productivity, and their work quality. Hence, really emphasizing really being able to predict and develop top performers based on evaluating their skills and proficiencies in different areas. Recently, in an international airline that we were working with, they used the cognitive assessment for their crew scheduling department. For some time, their HR and operations department was looking for a good tool to evaluate whether candidates would manage the demands of the jobs, which included complex problem solving, scheduling and coordinating planes, pilots, and people. And they found that the cognitive assessment was extremely essential in helping them uncover a person's fit into their given roles. You can also get a lot more insight on your teams and help understand patterns and different strengths and areas for further training and development by assessing your entire workforce in this area. So determining, okay, where are the strong points that we have on our team and where are areas that additional training and support may be needed. So this is a great tool to really get a good gauge and look into a team's strengths and their potential risks and areas for development at a quick glance. So some of the key takeaways on cognitive testing that I wanted to emphasize is that they really just help highlight that we all have different strengths and skills. And these areas are all really measurable and predictive of on-the-job performance. So they can really help you in putting people in the right roles to help support their strengths and abilities. Overall, cognitive ability has been proven to account for significant variations in on-the-job performance across all job categories. So let's make better data-driven decisions when it comes to hiring, training, and developing our workforce. So that really sums it up for the webinar today on how to use cognitive testing to hire top performers. We do have some time left over to answer and address any questions or comments that you might have. I'm just seeing here a few questions that have come in throughout the session. So thank you for sending out those questions. I will read out each of those questions out loud and address them for the group. So first question I have here is, how should I evaluate which roles I should be doing cognitive assessments for? Great question. So the first thing to do to determine that is doing a job analysis. And the reason for that is that doing a job analysis and understanding, okay, what are some of the really important areas that you would need to be successful within a given role, that would help you identify those areas. So how you can do that is having a job expert evaluate and determine, okay, what does success look like for this role? What types of skills would a high performer need to have to be successful in this role, so that if you highlight those areas, like for instance, if language is really important, or communication is important, or spatial abilities are really important, the cognitive assessment could be a great route for identifying and assessing those key areas. Okay, the next question we have is, would you use a cognitive tool to screen people in and out during the selection process? So another great question. As a general rule of thumb, we would say don't use any type of assessment, whether it's cognitive or different types of cognitive psychometric assessments, as a pass or fail. We say to use it as a guide to probe and find areas the person might need training or assistance on. So if you're looking to use this during the hiring process, it's a great opportunity to probe into those potential areas for concern with the provided personalized interview questions. So really using that as a guide to understand, okay, how will this person perform on the job? Are they aware of the steps that they might need to take to address the potential areas for concern? And based on the answers that you're given from the responses, you might have the peace of mind or reassurance that you need to make the right judgment call on a candidate. Okay, so another question we have is, who would I contact to get more info on CQ and pricing? So great question. You can get in touch with me for that information. I've left my contact information on screen here. So if you have any further questions on that, you can definitely get in touch with me by phone or email, whatever is easiest. Okay, great. Another great question that's come in is, how stable are the candidates' results and how long are they valid for? Great question. So typically, as I mentioned during this session, one of the areas that could be subject to drastic improvements is the mechanical reasoning. And the reason for that is, with additional training, with additional practice and learning, that's a skill that you can definitely develop on. That's probably one of the areas that we have seen the most significant improvements within. The numerical and verbal, Of course, again, practice makes perfect. So reassessing is a great idea. Typically, we say that you can reassess people with the cognitive tool every 6 months to really measure if there's been any improvements in a person's cognitive abilities. Okay, great. I'll just stay on the line for another few moments in case there are any additional questions, but that seems to be all for now. If you think of anything else, and if you have any further questions, my contact info is on screen, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for your time today, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks again for attending How to Use Cognitive Testing to Hire Top Performers. Enjoy your afternoon.